I don't support that. Like, I don't buy that. And I'll call my students out at that point. You can see come March.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. It's like, and again, I'll have that conversation. Like, you did not earn the right to fail. You don't have the right to fail right now.
Welcome back to the show, everyone. The Art of the Fail, in case you did not know or you clicked on a wrong link. So for those of you who are listening over strictly just the audio, or if you're watching this video, thank you for joining in on today's episode. Super excited about today's episode. We have another amazing guest, Melanie Sodka. It's like vodka, but with an S. Melanie told us that, so I'm glad that we kind of clarified things before butchering the last name. And so just a little bit about Melanie before we kind of get into it. She's an entrepreneur, speaker, writer, business professor, and she actually also hosts her own podcast called Capacity Creator. So Melanie, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're welcome. You are very welcome. All right, so in typical fashion, we're going to get started with a quick Q&A, and it's really just for our guests to get to know you a little bit more. So let's hop right into it. What did you have for breakfast this morning?
Oh, I have a protein shake every morning.
Every morning, seven days a week. Don't deviate from that.
I rarely deviate from that. That is my go-to. I put it in my Vitamix. I don't know if you want to know what goes in there. But yes.
Yeah, I was gonna ask.
Sure, why?
Let's give us a recipe.
Let's have it.
A recipe. It's the quickest thing. I have two kids running around at home, so whatever I can throw in there. So it's usually a vegan protein powder that goes in there with a banana, frozen fruit, some collagen, because hey, this lady's got to keep her skin nice. And sometimes if there's spinach, there's spinach in the fridge, then I will throw that in there too. Very easy.
Very nice.
Right on.
Yeah.
Very easy. I think I might have to adopt that recipe.
God.
Well, actually, I have to get started with actually doing a protein shake, anyways, to begin with. So, next question: how many cups of coffee or tea do you consume in a day?
It depends on the day, and it depends on what's happened the night previous. So typically, it's 1 to 2 in the morning and maybe 1 in the afternoon. I have been known to frequent the Tim Hortons on campus often, but I'm trying to cut back on that a little bit. Because I don't know if you guys knew this.
So we got another coffee drinker.
Oh, yeah. But I was just reading something from Bruce Bazar, and he was talking about the effects of caffeine, which there's so many studies, right, that say, oh, it prevents Alzheimer's, or, oh, it's cancer causing. Like, it just goes back and forth constantly. But the latest one is that it stays in your body for about 4 hours, and the effects actually take 30 to 60 minutes to take place. So if you're grabbing one before a meeting or before something where you need some energy, you're too late because it's going to take 60 minutes. So once that meeting is done, that's when you're going to feel the high of the caffeine, which I wasn't necessarily aware of.
Right.
Do you know if there's difference between natural caffeine and then caffeine that you get from like the coffee bean itself?
That's a good question.
Interesting. No, I do not know much about that. Do you?
Yeah, I'm just curious because no, I don't. I take this pre-workout in the morning because I work out in the morning, and it, I believe, has 200 milligrams of natural caffeine, which is a lot. It's like a large coffee or two. And
a large, that's like,
but
it's like an XL.
But they recommend 20 or 30 minutes before the workout,
right,
which is interesting. And I would say that I definitely within 30 minutes I feel the effects.
Yeah, it needs to kick in for sure.
Makes sense.
Yeah, interesting.
All right, I'm gonna pull us kind of back towards these questions there. iPhone or Android?
Android, Samsung user all the way.
Yes.
Is that
we've made it back to half halfway point. I think half guests Android, half guests
Yeah,
Apple.
yeah, because
We're back.
I
We're
thought
reeling them back in.
Apple was taking the lead there for a little bit, so
Apple just,
I think we're
it just
50-50
frustrates me.
right
like,
now.
It doesn't seem as intuitive, and I know all your Apple listeners are going to be like, what the, but the Android just makes so much more sense business-wise and connects to the things I need it to. It works well for me.
I love it.
Awesome. Favorite book that you have either read or listened to? This could be within the past month, year, or, if you have a favorite book of all time.
Okay, so this is completely unconventional because I am looking at my bookshelf right now and it's full of books. And I am not necessarily a fiction reader at all. I'm all about nonfiction, so I geek out on professional development and cognitive psychology and things like that. But the best little book that I have read in the last month is called, it's a kid's book, and I can't remember the author, but it's called What to Do with an Idea. And it captures like the entrepreneurial brain in such a simple way that my kids ate it up because they follow what I do. But I'm also going to read it to my students. So I'll keep you posted on their reactions to that. But it's literally like, I think, a 15-page little book for kids called What to Do with an Idea. And it is exactly how we feel. Like, you guys know you have this idea that you've pursued and you've been successful with it and you keep going with it. And it talks about how the idea follows you and it's relentless. And sometimes it looks like it's going to swallow you whole, but other times it's there to like boost you up. So it's such a beautiful little story. So that's my favorite one.
Very cool. If you can find the name and the author, we'll put it in the show notes for us.
Okay, that sounds good.
So the next two questions I have kind of pertain to you hosting your own podcast. First one, what has been the biggest challenge to date so far with hosting your own podcast? Like, have there been any major, minor, what you would call quote unquote fails with that?
And guys, like, as a side note, I love the name of the podcast because it truly made me reflect. So when you say fail, listening to the guests and how they've defined failure, right? It's so personal to everybody. Mm-hmm. But when it comes to hosting a show, I've been pleasantly surprised. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. I was scared shitless. Like, I sat in the studio at Hive Studios in Hamilton, across from my guests, because I like to do live podcasts with the person in front of me, if it's possible. And I was just scared of dead air. I was scared of running out of things to ask. I was scared the guest was going to be uninspired and it was going to fall flat. But those things didn't happen, right? Like, it really proved that just like active listening and being curious like a kid, like childlike curiosity, can bring on fantastic conversation. And I think, when you start to plan out the way you think the podcast is going to go, it doesn't go that way. And that is so great because, the turns and the twists that it takes, the listeners have really appreciated that.
Absolutely. That's actually a really good point. And Chris and myself have definitely noticed that. That's one of the reasons why we do not try to script things or like premeditate things too much. We like it to be as natural and have that organic flow to it.
Yeah, I mean, I grapple with whether or not we should even sometimes chime in and just try and put all the focus around the guest. But I'm going to chime in now because it's our podcast and we do what we want. But we definitely, like, the one thing that we added in terms of structure was making it unstructured. We made it long form, and that allowed us to, like you said, be active listeners, which I applaud you for, because it's not easy, and I know I've had those exact same fears and struggles, and I'm sure we're figuring that out as we go. But with a little bit of less structure, we have found actually better conversations. So it's interesting that you reflected that way as well.
Oh, for sure. Agreed. It's funny because, there's a stat out of the University of California of Irvine, I believe, and it's quoted in one of the books called The Focus Effect. And they say that we're distracted every 3 minutes of the day. So there's something that pops up, there's a message, there's a thought, there's something that distracts us every 3 minutes. And the craziest part, and I do talk about this on my podcast with more elaboration, but the craziest part of this stat is that it takes us on average 23 minutes to get back to task. So you are now, like, you're distracted,
Wow.
but to get back to task, you have to realign yourself. You have to get back into your mental space. And so there's like 26 minutes gone, right? That throws you off. So I found it interesting. So when you're in a podcast, the same thing pops through my mind is that how many people are tuning in, tuning out, and are they going to listen to the end? Because, the build up, right? We're just building up to the great stuff right now. And we've been on for what, like 5-10 minutes?
Right.
Yeah.
How about that? Yeah. Maybe longer.
Yeah, a little bit longer. So stick around.
Next,
folks,
next
we got
question.
some
Yeah. Please, yes, stick around. All right, next question. Then we have one more after this.
Sure.
So I'm gonna kind of flip that last question around on you. What do you love most about hosting your own podcast?
The unexpected. Like I get so excited, and I don't know what conversation will take place. Like we just talked about the unscripted piece and letting it flow. And so I love where the guests end up taking it, because it blows my mind. I'm always surprised pleasantly. And yeah, that's the biggest piece for me, is like you never know where the conversation's going to go and what you're going to get. And I love that. I'm not a huge predictable person. I love spontaneity. I love flying by the seat of my pants. And so, a lot of times that's what happens within a podcast. So that is what I absolutely love the most about the time with my guests, for sure.
How did you have the foresight to, I'm assuming here, I guess, lower your expectations in a way to allow you to have that spontaneity in those conversations and really be surprised by some of the conversations that have unfolded?
Interesting. So how did I work my mindset for that, or how do I manage that?
Yeah, because I mean, I know I'm guilty of having expectations of the type of conversation that may or may not come out of a particular guest or a particular day. But it sounds like you've really figured that piece out about how to, enjoy the spontaneity and enjoy the surprises that come up in these conversations. It's
just, I think it comes down to personality. And it's something that I study and that I research on quite a bit. And there are people who plan, there are people who like the structure, there are people who require that for their own personal equilibrium. And that structure boxes me in and stifles my creativity. And so I really think it does come down to a personality thing, where I just, that's my preferred method of going through life. It drives my husband crazy. It drives a lot of people around me crazy. But, there's, I have obviously infused structure in my life. I have to, as a human being, as a productive human being, but it's just part of who I am. But for people who are more structured, how to let that stuff go is just trust, right? Like just have more trust in where the conversation will go. Have trust in yourself that you're providing an opportunity for people to learn from your show. We always have to curate things. I think we're always on the hook or feeling on the hook to curate amazing material, because like how many podcasts are out there, right? And so we want to make sure that we're doing great. We're at the top. But curation doesn't always work.
It's a
good point.
Such a good self-aware point. I mean, I'm sure Christian wants to strangle me sometimes because I will literally be, sitting on the edge of indecisiveness for weeks, battling of whether or not I'm going to even release an episode that we recorded because I don't like the quality or what have you. And I think at the end of the day, it's about putting it out, learning from those hiccups, and like you said, there's so many podcasts out there, and you're not going to win by just tweaking every little aspect of it, to get it perfect, because perfect doesn't really exist.
Doesn't exist.
No, it doesn't.
It's
Nobody
not gonna
wants
happen. Wow,
perfect
your
necessarily.
chair
I mean,
is squeaky.
people think they do, but yeah, it's the nuances. It's like the funny parts. It's the drops. It's the hiccups that actually keep people engaged.
Yep. Sorry, I'm a little.
Apologize to the listeners and Melanie for my squeaky
I'm a little
chair.
I'm a little distracted. This chair is driving me nuts right now. It's
I'm just gonna sit like this for the rest of the podcast.
Yeah.
And try and stay very still.
Oh
Wasn't
my
that
god.
timely?
It's funny because it wasn't bothering me at first, but now it's like, now that I know it's squeaking, all I'm doing is paying attention to this squeaky chair, which is, anyways, I got to move on from the squeaky chair. So to wrap things up with these questions.
Sure.
I was going to say quick, but those were not quick at all. Are you ready to, I guess we've kind of already got started, but are you ready to actually get started and kind of dive into the failure part of the podcast?
Hell yes. Let's do it. Let's go.
All righty.
Excellent.
Let's do it.
So, Melanie, our listeners have very little context about you. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about you? I really enjoy going back as early as you're willing to go. You know, what your childhood was like, what your parents do, and how that maybe formed you into who you are today.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus. Okay, how do I start that, right? Where to go? Oh my gosh. Well, I'm an only child. Grew up in Niagara. This is just boring shit. Okay, let me just tell you about how entrepreneurialism didn't necessarily exist in my immediate family. So let's just say that I'm probably the most entrepreneurial person in our family at this point. I'm pretty much the only person who owns their own business, teaching business and that type of thing. So a lot of my family will scratch their head and say, where'd this kid come from? But I will say that there's an entrepreneurial mindset that exists, right? You don't have to be an entrepreneur. And I teach this a lot to my students.
Right.
So growing up, I always wanted to be in business, and I always wanted to teach. I was the only child, so let's face it, like I took the stage quite a bit. Maybe I stole the stage quite a bit. And so I think I just got used to being able to express my thoughts, and I had a lot of listening ears. So I think that helped me be comfortable with my profession of speaking, being in front of people, and just being comfortable in my skin that way. So growing up, I think that has really contributed. I was given a lot of latitude as well to try different things. So always involved in different sports. I even just schooling. I started off in kinesiology, ended up in HR, and now I have my own business. So there's the whole unstructured approach, which has served me well, which has just allowed me to go where I am. I think that in a nutshell, everything has contributed to where I am today. I don't have regrets, so I don't live my life with any regrets. Let's be honest. I don't think I've ever admitted this before publicly, but I failed out at kinesiology. I didn't get back in first year. So
you heard it first on the Art of the Fail here.
You did. And that one almost made me sweat a little bit because, there's a part of me as well that likes to create, and maintain a certain image. Art of Fail. I failed out of kinesiology, folks,
That's
so
right.
that wasn't cool. But again, no regrets, because that's just not what I was meant to do. And I realize that now,
Right.
which is great. So I love where I am. I mean, corporate world chewed me up and spit me out, and I loved it and hated it, but it's allowed me to do what I do today.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So take us back to you failing out of kinesiology. What got you interested in that originally? And then how did that unfold a little bit?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so just my love for sport. So, was just an avid athlete growing up. Basketball was my favorite sport, the sport that I really did well in. And I thought, and I wanted to teach. So I thought, let's go to kinesiology. Let me learn about sport and the human body, and then become a phys ed teacher. Yeah, I'm one of those, right? So I thought that was going to be the trajectory, and then realized that I really sucked at math and like science in general. Like it just wasn't my strong suit. So quickly realized that I wasn't going to excel in those areas.
You're in good company here.
Who else isn't very strong suited in those areas?
Both of us.
Okay.
Oh, both of us.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say, I'm not sure if you've listened to any of the previous episodes where we talk a little bit about our own educational fuck ups, you could say,
Right.
or mishaps or experience. But yeah, Chris and myself actually both failed out of our programs too. I got back into, I don't know if did you get back into yours?
Unfortunately not.
Yeah, I got back into mine, but I was kind of like, why did I even bother getting back into this? Because I did not like it, but oh well.
Yeah,
so it's funny. I don't know. I just find it really like funny because most of the guests that we've had on all share this very like common trait where I don't think that many of us realize how common it actually is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to be a broken record or say something that everybody already knows, but I mean, almost all of our guests had either struggled or failed out of their program if they were in one. And most of them stop you right there and then make sure to reiterate the fact that they did learn something from the university experience, but it was outside of the classroom or was, not as technical or tactical as, people think it is. But it's interesting. Yeah, it's super, super interesting. So after you flunked out, what was your next move? What you must have been distraught and worried about what the next move was.
Or happy.
Yeah.
Or relieved.
Yeah.
No, I was worried about what the parentals were going to say because they were helping to
right.
build. So that was an interesting conversation. Summer school was next to upgrade, and then sociology was my natural next move. But I wanted to add something about this experience because I didn't earn the right to fail. And this is one of the, I guess, learning experiences or lessons in my life that I pass on to my students. And earning the right to fail means you have to go 100% and still not succeed. And a lot of my students will go 80% of the way and stop. It's like if you're running a kilometer race or a 10-kilometer race and you stop at 8K or 800 meters, and you're like, whatever, I'm going to give up. I'm not going to make it, or I have something else to do, or I'm just bored. You don't even earn the right to fail at that point.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So would you say then that there is a distinct difference between, because I'm actually pretty interested in this now, that there's a distinct difference between failing, where like you're putting actually your blood, sweat, and tears into something that doesn't pan out the way you want it to, and just merely stopping and giving up?
Okay, you're going to have to repeat that one because I couldn't hear you. Please.
Maybe, yeah, Chris, you ask.
Yeah, so he was asking what sort of dichotomy you see between an individual who just stops and gives up and how they perceive that as failure versus actually, running as hard as you can and then falling down.
That's a great question because, again, I think it's how we perceive what failing is all about. And as a prof, I'll give you an example. I had a student who came out of my entrepreneurial program, or who took my entrepreneurial program at Mohawk, and is hugely successful, right? She has her own business. She's making great coin. Like she's on to something.
Right.
And I won't name names just because I'm not sure if she'd want me to share this, but she had one course to finish, one exam to complete, and she didn't even do it. But she had a good excuse, right? For me, I was like, okay, this is justified. Running a business, she's running a successful business, and she couldn't finish the program because of that. So she can always come back and finish it. So that's one example of like, okay, I get it. Like you're focused on your business, that took precedence. Fine. People who just get lazy, people who just go 80% and just don't have enough enough intention or, you know, enough stamina or enough guts to finish, I don't support that. Like, I don't buy that. And I'll call my students out at that point. You can see come March.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah. It's like, and again, I'll have the conversation. Like, you did not earn the right to fail. You don't have the right to fail right now.
Right.
Man, I love that concept. Honestly, I think it's a really refreshing way to spin a topic that, you know, gets thrown around a lot about, you know, lazy millennials, and I argue on both sides of that, you know, but I like the fact that you say that it's not earned, because I think what's not earned is not necessarily the right to fail, at least in my redefinition, but the right to learn what you could have learned or grown on the other side of the actual failure.
Right.
Yes. I love that point, because when you give up, you're not learning anything. It's really, that's a habit. And it's probably a cycle, and there's nothing to learn. You're probably they might not even feel like shit after they give up, or quit early. They'll probably, it's probably just the norm for them. So there's nothing, you're right, there's nothing to learn. There's a lot lost at that point.
So I think I've asked this exact same question before, because we seem to also breed a plethora of sociology degrees on the art of the fail. But with the sociology degree in hand, what was your next move? What were you inspired to do afterwards?
I think you did the exact same thing too, though. Holding the power, the power of the $40,000 paper.
I
more.
I did what most parents would probably despise. I went out west for the summer. I went to Lake Louise with a girlfriend, and we went and we worked. And my parents were like, "What the hell are you doing? Like, we just paid for education, and now you're going to go bus tables. Like, what is this, right?" And so I did it anyways. I didn't even go to my graduation, which is probably a bit still a stinging point, but. So I went there, but I knew it was coming back. I knew it was coming back. Right. I needed to just get out, go have fun, go see a different part of Canada, travel a little bit, and that was the best way. So I came back that September. I wasn't gone for very long, and I threw myself into human resources. So I don't know if that's another common trajectory for your sociology guest, but, you know, the gift of the gab,
a lot of corporate paths that happen after that sociology degree.
Well, and that's where I went. I ended up at General Mills. So I was in corporate for almost 10 years, and I did marketing and HR. So again, just a huge learning curve for most of the time. But no regrets. Right? Life brings you places, you make the best of it, you go with it, and you take what you can from it.
What do you think you learned the most from your 10 years at General Mills, or just in the corporate world in general?
I learned what I wasn't supposed to do. Let me rephrase that. I learned what I wasn't meant to be doing. And I'll give you a bit more context on that. It's interesting, because when it's still always an uphill battle, or there's always a steep learning curve, at some point you have to plateau. At some point you have to be comfortable. But I felt like it was always an uphill battle. I think the corporate world just didn't allow me to be spontaneous, to be as creative as I wanted to be, to have as much latitude as I need. That's why entrepreneurs go and work for themselves. I didn't like working for other people. I didn't like trying to please somebody all the time, right? Like I was just kind of the captain of my own ship. And so that's what I learned, is that I can't work for anybody. Like, I don't aspire to be dean or associate dean. Like, I like my prof job. I like my side gig, because I get to manage that myself. So that was a big, huge learning.
Now, so I'm we get deep here on the Art of the Fail. Some listeners or people watching on YouTube might ask, 10 years. What took you so long to figure that out? Was it just life, responsibilities, or what was the thinking there?
I was probably feeding my own ego a little bit, right? So small town girl from Niagara, working in Toronto, big corporate, moving up, because I was successful. I did well, but it was to the detriment of a lot of things, right? It was a detriment to relationships, sacrificed a lot of time. Like I was working 12, 14, 16 hours, traveling a lot. But small town girl working big city, big corporate. So, that kept my ego fed quite a bit. That was a big piece that took me a while to realize. And finally, I had a baby. So, for your listeners who have babies, that changes your world completely. So commuting an hour and a half each way with a babe and just wasn't going to work anymore. So I tried my hand at teaching, and that's where I completely fell in love. And
this is what keeping your expectations at bay gets you, because I was surprised by the first half of the answer, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, me too. So I was Chris kind of beat me to that question. I was going to ask something very similar, but I guess my next question to sort of top that one off would be, when did you come to the realization after the 9 or the 10 years that, like, okay, enough is enough? Like, now,
the tipping point.
Like,
maybe?
What was the tipping point, or probably the many tipping points throughout your career? But like, what was the final like aha moment where it's like, okay, I can't, and I really should not be doing this anymore for myself. I need to shake things up and do stuff more for me.
The tipping point, I don't believe there's necessarily one tipping point. I think it's a culmination of different points within those 10 years that start to stack up.
Absolutely.
And then I think it's the courage to jump, the courage to move. I took a huge pay cut too, right? Like going from corporate to teaching. Like, people don't go into teaching to make money. Like, let's just be honest, right? You just don't. You do it because you love it, and you do it for the intrinsic value. And I think that's where I was unfulfilled, was the intrinsic part. So at General Mills, I got to dabble and I got to taste that intrinsic piece by, when I went into HR, I got to do training, and I got to inspire people and help people enjoy their jobs. So again, I found a way to leverage some of my unhappiness in corporate, turn it around and help people get a little bit more enjoyment out of corporate. I mean, corporate's not bad. It's just not for everyone. And So I think at that point when I was like, wow, okay, so I can get up here, inspire people, and teach. Where else could I do this? And I had done my master's while I was at General Mills as well, so that helped get my foot in the door into a teaching position. And so I think, having the baby, knowing that I could actually stand up in front of people, inspire them, and teach them, I was like, okay, let's try a teaching gig. Let's see how this goes with some college students, and if I can handle it. And I fell in love. Was it?
That's awesome. And I really enjoyed the point you made about how corporate isn't necessarily bad. It's just not for everybody. And it's something we talk about a lot on the podcast, where, I think, and even in how we are attempting to target our listeners, our listenership, our podcast in general, we're not necessarily pointed at startups or entrepreneurs specifically.
Right.
We really just want to have nice, open and honest, long form conversations with anyone willing to sit down with us. And one of the things is that, I think you touched on it in the beginning about entrepreneurship, and I don't believe that entrepreneurship can necessarily be taught, and I also don't believe that entrepreneurship should be for everybody. It gets way too overglorified for something that's very difficult.
Yes.
And there are lots of benefits reason the three of us do it, and a lot of the listeners out there. But there's many reasons not to, and so that's why we love having all kinds of different people on the show to talk about these experiences. Maybe not only to inspire somebody to leave a position, change a position, or quite possibly stay, or make a lateral movement of sorts. So I'm glad that you brought that up. Now, the question that came up as I was listening to that story was, what is the one thing that you think that you took from the corporate experience at GM that really, really helped your entrepreneurial endeavors? And I know you said, the training at GM catapulted the teaching, but what did you take from that experience that maybe people don't realize only comes from that world, and that's actually quite valuable?
I think it was just the diversified skill. There's a lot, Chris, to be honest with that one. Like, there's just a huge answer because I surprised myself at times, right? So, look, starting from kinesiology and going into the business world is a little unconventional. That just wasn't the trajectory that I thought or that people thought that I would end up in. So, where I am now is where I'm meant to be. But I think, building that confidence would be number one, is like, okay, I was able to slay the business world. Like I did well, even though I didn't always feel comfortable in my skin and I knew that it wasn't for me, I could still do it. So that was huge resilience building. So just being resilient against the pressure, against the demands, meeting, we were selling cereal, right? You have to sell cereal, which we were lucky because we had the number one brand, Cheerios at the time, but still, we had to meet these quotas and we had to meet our numbers every year. So I think those are two things. So just confidence and resilience were two of the big life lessons that still live within me, right? And I think everybody would experience something different, but that stuff sticks. And I think that'll be with me until I die. Like, that was just a huge proof to myself that I can overcome some big pressure.
Very cool. Now let's take that and talk about you starting your own business, and super excited to hear the inspiration behind your podcast and how that sort of started out, and what maybe hiccups have come up in the initial stages.
Sure. So starting my own business was something, again, corporate world, I knew I didn't want to work for anybody else. I thought, okay, I'm going to go and get certified in coaching, because before exiting General Mills, I realized I was hooking up some of the executives with their own coaches. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm doing that naturally already. Like, people would come to my office and, really close the door, and they'd want to have these big, deep conversations with me. So I knew that my natural curiosity could lend itself to a business. So I went and got certified in coaching through CPI, which was life-changing, because at the same time you're going through counseling, essentially, which is crazy. So met some fantastic people, and then I got my first massive gig from my certification process. So I'm bilingual, so I also speak French. So they were looking, this company called I Am Gold was looking for a person who can run training sessions for their managers up in northern Quebec. And I don't hardly turn things down, which is work capacity, and I'll get to that in a second, but I don't turn much down, or I didn't at that stage. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. So fly me to Quebec for a week, 2 stints of these weeks, doing full training in French. Now, for your bilingual listeners, business French is like a third language. So I was listening to CBC in French for weeks on end so that I can brush up on my business French, just trying to understand how the hell do I get my head around, I'm going to be training all day for 2 weeks up in northern Quebec. And again, for my Francophone friends out there, right, like the French is a little different in different parts of Canada. So anyways, needless to say, it went really well. I'm glad I took the chance. It was difficult, but that really catapulted, because then I could see how much money I can make. So I saw how lucrative, going out on your own and doing this and capitalizing on my innate skills could be. So that was a big boost for me. So it continued from there, and it continued word of mouth. But where capacity creator comes from is, like, let's say just the next 10 years of my life, after corporate, is about saying yes to everything. And as entrepreneurs, in the beginning, 99% of us say yes to everything, because why would we turn down a check? Why would we turn down an opportunity to build our brand and our portfolio? And I was saying yes so much that I was back at that whole depletion stage. I wasn't respecting capacity, overworking myself to the detriment of family, friends, so back into that cycle again. But high capacity people can do a lot, right? So why would I say no? So
it's a really fascinating. Oh, sorry. There's a bit of a delay, but it's a really fascinating topic. I was talking to a friend and fellow startup founder of mine a while ago, and we were talking about saying yes to things, saying no to things, how we respect our own time. And I'll be honest, something I grapple with a lot. I actually err on the side of saying yes to more than maybe I should. And
me too.
I often prioritize efficient communication. So I'm an email answer, pretty quick at emailing and communicating that way. And the reason I'm telling you and the listeners this is because a lot of people would strongly disagree with that, and I'd love to get your take on how to balance that whole situation between saying yes, and I'm sure too there has to do with stages of your life, right? I know that I think Christian might echo this when I say when you're much younger, or you're just even when you're just starting out, if you have the self-awareness to know that you need to learn a whole bunch of shit, then saying yes, I think actually helps you there, because you're going to fail more. On the other side of that failure is the growth and the learnings. So I'll shut the fuck up and you tell us what you think the balance is there.
So
please do.
I love what you're saying.
Just kidding.
Because there's different frameworks that I've developed to help coach people and that I use in my keynotes on how to say yes and how to say no, right? Because your capacity is finite, right? And I don't know if you guys can see me, but I have my two hands up, and between my two hands, like that's the time I have. So how do I cut that up into the chunks that I want to devote my energy and my passion to? And how big are those chunks? What percentage, of time is that taking me? And so you have to be really discerning about that. You have to be really disciplined in sticking to your core values. So again, this last 10 years has been really an exercise of what is it that I value in my life, and you have to pare that down. So I call this thing a 3x3, and it's like, what are your top 3 roles in your life? What are the top 3 roles that you play in the world right now? And so for your listeners, they could kind of take quick notes. So you think about those top 3 roles, and then you put down 3 objectives that you want to accomplish within those roles. So 3 roles and 3 objectives for each. And that's kind of your roadmap. That's what you stick to. And anything that is incongruent with that is what you have to say no to. And you can revisit this. Like, I'm a big goal setter. Every year, my husband and I sit down in January. We're like, okay, what do we want to accomplish? And we've been doing this for the last 6 years. And then we go back every year and say, okay, did we do it? Did we not? So it's a way to keep yourself accountable. But really,
family OKRs. I love it.
Yeah. Right. So that's a big piece. But I love what you said. Like, the first 10 years of my career, bring it on. I didn't have children. I had the capacity, I had the resilience. I had the time. So yeah, sure, say yes. But there's a time where that starts to change, and you have to start respecting it a little bit more.
I think too, because this is, this as well for everyone listening or watching, like, I think most of us do grapple with that, like, unknown or uncertainty of like what our capacity is, and like how often we should be saying yes versus no. Like, I think it's something that literally
the FOMO in the no as well.
Exactly. I think it's something that everyone resonates at some point, some point in their life. But I also think too that, starting out, you truly don't know what your capacity is. So to really actually figure out what your capacity is and what you should be saying no to, you have to say yes to those things, in my opinion. Like, if I didn't say yes to 10 things, for example, then I wouldn't have known that I should not have said no to maybe the 9th or the 10th thing, for example.
Yeah, and it comes full circle, right, with the whole not earning the right to fail.
Right.
Is if you're early on, again, not necessarily just age we're talking here, but early on in any endeavor.
I actually love that, earning the right to fail.
Yeah, it's great. And if you actually don't try it, or you don't maybe say yes in this context, then you actually aren't earning the right to get on the other side of that, maybe.
Right.
Yeah, that is a chapter in
my I need to say no more
book that I'm writing. So stay tuned.
Oh, very nice. Is there anything that you can hint about the upcoming book?
Is that another first mention on the Art of the Fail podcast?
You know what? It might be. It might be the first big public mention. Yeah, so there you go. I'm not going to tell you to mark your calendar yet, but it's in progress.
All right, there we go. It's in progress.
Quick thing. Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
Okay, I was going to take you through a trajectory of, just to your point, Christian, too, about like knowing, you have to hit this point. It's almost like you have to hit the wall to know that where your limits are, and saying yes to as many things as you can before you're like, okay, shit, I gotta put some parameters. I gotta put a framework in place. So the common trajectory for a high capacity person starts with saying yes to everything, right? So you're indulgent. You have all this energy. You're enthusiastic, and you're saying yes. But there comes a point where you have so many commitments on your plate that you can no longer fulfill them, and so you kind of fall down to another kind of capacity where it's fatigued. Like, you've hit burnout. You can't do anything anymore. You're demotivated. You've probably let a couple people down, and it's quite a shitty place to be. So you don't want to stay there very long. So then you kind of recalibrate, and you go to a different profile called reserved. So now you're way more careful and a lot more discerning about what you're saying yes to. So you're probably saying a no a lot more often, just to build up those reserves again. But the peak, or the optimal place that you want to be in this trajectory, is the maximized capacity. And that's where you're respecting the 3x3 rule that I talked about. That's where you're laser focused on what you want to accomplish, and you're dedicated to the top priorities, and you're on your game. You're not over caffeinated. Your things are firing at all cylinders. So you want to try and preserve and maintain that space as much as you can. And yeah, we're probably going to tip back over into indulgent capacity, but how do you stop the cycle from going through, fatigue, and then just kind of tip back over to maximize so that you could stay on your game?
That's amazing. And it sounds to me like all of this starts with at least defining some core values and some core goals. I think that's pretty consistent. I know you write down what your to-do list and goals each day, which I admire.
Each day, I do. You know what? I've been really shitty at doing it lately.
But let me down. I was propping you up, and now.
But he's not wrong. I typically do that, and what I do is I just write down 3 things for the day. So those would be like my 3 critical tasks that I need to get done for the day, and pretty much I don't end my day until those 3 things get done. and I'll write down what I call like a floating list or a rotating list, and I'll keep that on a separate page, and anything on that list I'll start to tackle after I have those 3 critical tasks finished. It works.
Fantastic.
Yeah. I think too, not a tidbit from me, but just something I'm observing from you guys and a lot of our guests is, once you have those goals and values sort of figured out, writing it down and actually putting pen to paper, so to speak, actually helps. Execute those goals. I would be super interested in what you have to say about that, Melanie.
For sure. Again, it becomes your roadmap, and it's such a good practice. Like Robin Sharma is the one who taught me the 20-20-20 rule. 20 minutes of exercise in the morning, 20 minutes of learning something new in the morning, and 20 minutes of planning, right? So setting up your day is so critical to stay on task. A lot of the times, like I said before, I would fly by the seat of my pants. I'd get up and I'd be at the mercy of my day. Well, I could pull it off most times, but again, I'm like, wow, I'm thanking my lucky stars that stuff didn't blow up in my face. And I don't want to run my life like that. So taking the time in the morning, that really precious hour to do those things sets up the day in such a way that it's almost fail-proof, right? Like it would eliminate your podcast.
We hope not. Yeah, I was gonna say, we hope it's not fail-proof. But
so no one do that.
Yeah, we're just gonna snip that right out of the episode. No, that's awesome, Melanie. I want to be mindful of time here, running out. Is there anything that you want to say that we didn't get to before we finish off with what we always finish off with?
Okay, I'll just give you a quick visual because ego cake is one of the structures where it helps people respect their capacity. So just very quickly, where that came from is, it's a conversation with my mom, and she said, Mel, like your life looks like this beautiful, bountiful dessert table, right? So full of decadent desserts, and you have taken a bite out of every single one. I was like, yeah, hell yeah, like, and they're all good. And she asked me, which one have you enjoyed the most? And I couldn't answer her. And I think that's where ego drives us to overcommit, to overindulge. And I think that if we can just keep ourselves to our goals, to our values, and really stick to the things that we love and honor the energy that we have to pursue that, we'll stop the overindulging and we'll be happier people and more productive people.
That's an amazing point. And I think you're looking at the poster childs of overindulgence over here. We always have 4 or 5 projects on the go. But I just wanted to make a personal relatability there, because I know when I was younger, I fell in love with a bunch of different hobbies, and people always ask me
magic.
Yeah, you were gonna bring it up. Okay,
magic.
So I was a magician. I was an entertainer, actually.
It's actually really good, and I'm just gonna like throw it out there because Chris doesn't want me to throw it out there. But yeah, you guys should check it out on YouTube. His videos are still there. I was actually watching a few of them last week.
Excellent.
Sorry, Chris. Hey, they're good.
They're
actually good.
I've been trying to avoid that this entire podcast.
You just made my day.
Anyways,
my kids were doing perfect. So
you're gonna be watching magic videos, yeah, for the rest of your day.
So, but I really enjoyed it, and I did that for quite a few years when I was younger, and it's something I could have continued to do, but I always knew that entrepreneurship wouldn't leave me, and I had to pick one, I thought, because my thought was that I always wanted to be the best at whatever it is I did, and in order to do that, I feel like you have to have some level of commitment and obsession to something, and sometimes people have to make tough decisions, like my move out of the magic industry.
I'm actually kind of disappointed that you did not stick that through. Mind you, I probably wouldn't have met you, but nonetheless, it was good. Chris is just taking a quick break right now to fix our camera.
Yeah.
Candidly. And he is back.
Look at that. I also dabbled in video production when I was younger, and clearly made the right decision into entrepreneurship instead of focusing on that full time. Awesome. Melanie, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we go, what we'd like to do is ask our guests to share who they, or you in this instance, would call out and want to be on the Art of the Fail. It might be somebody you know, maybe it's somebody that you don't know, but really just want to hear more about their story, what happened there, type thing. Who would you call out for the Art of the Fail?
Ooh, good question. Again, this is somebody that ideally can come on the show, or just anybody that I'm curious about.
Anyone. We had who was it? Was it Sanjay? Somebody called somebody out that was dead.
Oh.
And but it was like he would have wished that he heard that story. Who was it?
I think it might have been Sanjay.
Yeah. Anyways, so it doesn't have to be anybody. I mean, ideally, obviously, this is a growth hack. I'm sure you could see between the lines here.
oh yeah, for sure. So I won't mention anybody that's deceased, so that we can possibly we can get a. You know, I followed this person for a long time. Who I love is Mel Robbins. There's so many. There's Mel Robbins. There's Robin Sharma. I love their literature. I love their stories. I mean, Mel Robbins has such a great story.
Wasn't Mel Robbins the one I was talking about the 5-second rule? Is that Mel Robbins?
Yes, that's her.
It is, right?
Yeah. Gotta get her on the show then.
And if you do, I have to come on the show as well. So just know that if you get her, I'm coming. We'll do a co-host.
Deal.
Awesome.
Yeah, she's fantastic. Yeah, she's quite inspiring, and she's failed. She's failed. So she's just failed to catastrophic points, but has rebounded so beautifully.
Amazing.
Perfect guest.
And that's a good way to end the show. Melanie, thank you so much again for coming on the show. Tell our listeners and watchers, whoever's, where they can find you and where they can find that podcast.
Whoever's.
Absolutely. Whoever else is on here. First of all, guys, I just want to thank you for having me and for really owning this topic. You guys do a fantastic job. I'm big fans.
Thank you.
And you guys are really, you're rock stars. So thank you for having me, and thanks for doing what you do.
We appreciate that.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about me, you can go to capacitycreator.com, or you can follow me on Instagram at Capacity Creator, Melanie Sodka, like vodka with an S.
Like vodka.
Yes, and the podcast is on iTunes and SoundCloud. Capacity Creator is the name. So I'd love to see you there. Excellent. And have some comments.
Awesome.
Yeah, we'll
listeners, you better subscribe. Yeah. Capacity Creator.
We'll put all of those links in the show notes too.
Yeah, so people can follow along. Awesome.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Melanie.
All right. Talk to you soon.
And thank you. No, not you. Yeah. Thank you for watching today's episode.
Thanks, everybody. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Before you leave, please subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you know when we put out new content. And there's some recent videos somewhere here, okay? Check those out because we got a lot of good content, a lot of good episodes for you. A lot of failures, a lot of fuck-ups, including our own.
That's it?
Right.